Okay. And our next talk's now going to be from Niklas, who's going to tell us now we get to hear about simplifying the delays that come up in the models. So
yes, precisely. Right, thank you. So let's see, get my computer in order here. There we go. Need to find where I am. There we go. Right. So I've been dabbling a bit with delays in systems biology, which will come in handy right now, I think. So my background is in physics and mathematics, but I turned to systems biology in my PhD. And in doing so, I found out that biology is actually complicated. And what I've been doing is trying to make sense of biology using mathematical modeling. And the story tends to go that you have some observation of some dynamics or some property of your biological system that you're interested in. You make some hypothesis of how this is coming about. You model, you translate this hypothesis to a model such so that you can deduce the consequences of those models, of those hypotheses, so that they can be compared with observations. And I say deduce here with quotation marks on it, because I do believe that mathematical models might be viewed as machines that deduces consequences from assumptions. But the question is, what assumptions are we actually making? And some assumptions are highly related to the hypothesis that we're exploring. It's about what is causing what. But we also need to make a lot of other assumptions. So we need to make some assumptions that has more to do with like the mathematical plumbing of your model. Like, is it fine to use continuous and deterministic variables? Or do I need to go to stochastic? Do I need to do discrete? You make also assumptions that are simplifications. Biology is complicated, and we cannot retain all of that complicated, all of the interactions that you have in biology in our mathematical model. That would become like intractable. You would not be able to squeeze any information out of your model. So you need to make simplified representations of things that might be going on, and you need to decide what to include and what to ignore. So one thing that I've been looking at is linear multi-step pathways, where essentially you just have a chain of transmission or a chain of reactions where one thing leads to the next and leads to the next in a nice and linear fashion. And you find this a bit all over the place in biology. You find it in signaling pathways. You find multi-step reactions in like protein synthesis, like a protein is built one amino acid but at the time. You find it in transport. So you find it a bit all over, but it poses a specific challenge when modeling, because you don't want to retain all of those steps in your model. They generally individually don't contribute that much to the dynamics you're interested in, but they do contribute with like parameters and nastiness for your model. So you want to make simplifications, and everyone already does this. And the most common simplification is to simply ignore most of this pathway. You hide it, and maybe you retain the first and the last step, and you hope that your model might be able to fit the dynamics of the system that generated, like of the real system and the longer system. So I was interested in figuring out like what are the consequences of making this assumption. So in order to do that, we actually generated synthetic data. So we generated random pathways of like different lengths, pathway lengths. We simulated them using random parameters, and we stored the output as some kind of fake data. And then we took a smaller model, a simplified version of this model, and tried to fit the output dynamics. And what we find is that if you generated dynamics from a 10-step pathway, and you try to fit a 2-step pathway from it, you might actually not do so well. So there seems that there are some problems with this approach to simplification. And not too surprisingly, the problem seems to get worse the more you're simplifying your original system. So if the original system actually only had 2 steps, then your 2-step model will fit fine. But if it had 50 steps, then your model will almost surely do fairly poorly. And somewhere in between here, there's a region where you might have done well, but you might also have done fairly poorly. And we wanted to figure out why this is, what's going on. We're clearly not representing the delay that this pathway is causing in a reasonable way. So we try to characterize the output dynamics. And we did this by essentially looking at what is the mean delay of the signaling that the output is sensing. And you can define this, it's just about like a normal mean. And you can actually find a relationship with it. And it turns out that it's just a sum over, like 1 over all of the rates that govern signal transmission between the pathway steps. So, and you can similarly define the standard deviation, which sort of reflects the width of this output peak. And if you normalize that width with the mean delay, you get something that's like essentially like it gives us some relationship for how sharp our output peak is. And since we have that the mean and the standard deviation, or like this, the mean and the width of this curve, you have the same quantities in here. One of them is a sum, one of them is a sum of squares, and this means that you might apply standard inequalities. So we can actually find the relationship between the mean delay and how spread out that delay is in this pathway. And it turns out that the sharpness of our curve is bounded by the square root of the pathway length. So when we generated the data, the longer our pathway was, the sharper our output became. But when we try to fit the model to that, then we quickly hit an upper bound where the model just becomes incapable of reproducing the data. And we also can figure out when this is happening. So like the question is, when do we hit the upper bound? And you hit it when all of the rates governing signal transmission are equal to one another. So when you take a 2-step model, or you take just a simplified model, and as soon as you get to the point where the model can no longer represent the original dynamics, it will optimize towards having all of its rates equaling one another. And this actually gives us 2 things. So it gives us a diagnostic to figure out when something is wrong in our own models. So if you train a model onto data and you find that, like you have a lot of parameters equaling one another, then that might indicate that you've made a simplification that just doesn't really work for you. And it also tells us that having all rates equal one another is often an optimal solution. So what if we take this and we try to make an alternative simplification, and we instead just assume that all rates are equal to one another, even if that might not be true. And then we say that, okay, so if all rates are equal to one another, we might let all the pathway length be a free parameter. Because now, whenever you update the parameter length, like all of the steps are equal. So you're not adding any more parameters by doing this. So you might so this is fine. And you can end up with a 3-parameter model where you have some scaling done by a single parameter. You have a rate parameter that's shared across all pathway steps. And then you have a pathway length, which you might also treat as a free parameter. And when you do this, you can actually solve it. And it has a nice little solution, which is just the convolution between your input and the probability density function of the Erlang distribution. So this means that what this model is contributing, this multi-step pathway model, is contributing an Erlang distributed delay between your output and your input. So it might not be true that all rates are equal to one another in biology, But then the question still remains, is it useful nevertheless? So to test this, we just again try to fit the simplified model to the data, and we see that it fits really, really nicely. It becomes even hard to distinguish the data from the model result here. So it seems that it might be useful. And looking at the cost values, which here is just an L1 norm, we see that the cost values is lower for the Erlang distributed delay than it is for the alternative two-step simplifications. And I should also note that these two simplifications, they're not quite drawn at random with the two-step. They have the same number of parameters. So yes, I would say that this assumption is useful. And you can see that it works with any inputs. It's not just for impulse inputs. You can do it for step input. You can do it for noisy functions. If you train the model on data generated with one type of input, and then you apply an entirely different type of inputs to both your data generating model and the simplified model, they both will behave the same. So it's nice and it's predictive. It seems to work. And we can actually go even a little bit further, because we derive this Erlang distributed delay with an integer value n, because n is our pathway length. So we started with a system of differential equations where we needed integer pathway lengths, because every step was a state variable. But actually, when we've gone to this distributed delays, and we're solving it as a convolution instead, there's nothing holding us back from allowing this parameter to be real valued. So if you do that, you get a gamma distributed delay instead. And it turns out that this has even better fidelity. So it's actually hard to see because they are both so good. But the gamma distributed delay is always equally good or better than the Erlang distributed delay. So now comes the question, like, what have we done? So we've made untrue assumptions. What have we broken? We've assumed that there are homogeneous rates that transfer information, and that might not be true. And in our case, that wasn't true at all. And we've assumed now in the gamma distributed delay a real valued pathway length, and that's just weird. What is a real valued pathway length? But the question is then, like, what then connects the model to reality? What connection do we still have left? So we've shown that we do have that they respond similarly to, like, they have similar input-output dynamics. So the model is still able to represent the dynamics that's being provided by the original system. And that's essentially good enough for me. But you can look even a little bit closer and you say that, what about the model components? So what about the parameters? Is there a mapping between the parameters to actual reactions? And here we do have some information loss. And I would argue that if you do simplification, you will always have some information loss. But so mapping from reality to the model is fine. So here reality is known to me because I've generated it myself. So that mapping is perfectly fine. However, going backwards is a little bit iffier. But we do have, you can find an analytical solution to this as well using inequalities, not a solution, you can find inequalities saying that the optimal value, the optimal pathway length of the distributed delay model, and so the optimal parameter for that will be smaller than or equal to the pathway length of the data. So it does tell you something, that parameter. We also have a relationship between the optimal rate parameter for the gamma or the Erlang distributed delay. And it's a full nasty expression, but the heuristic of it that's normally true is that the optimal rate parameter tends to follow the smallest rate of your original system. And if we compare this then to the alternative, it turns out that that's even worse. If we have this two-step model where essentially like every step that you retained, it looks as if you're simulating something real. Like everything has the shape of a normal reaction. But when you forced it to encompass the dynamics of your full system, you broke that connection anyway. And it turns out that the connection is way harder to work with here. So that, like, I think this distributed delays is simply the way to go. So distributed delays, they give high fidelity simplifications of multi-step reactions. So why are they so uncommon? And I think they are. I haven't seen many examples of them. I have seen examples. I've seen it in systems biology and in pharmacology, more so in engineering and control theory. But in biology, they seem to be very uncommon. And I think part of it has to do with awareness. Like, people don't know about this. And part of it has to do with tooling. And this is where Julia comes in. If you want to solve the gamma distributed delay, if you need to solve one of these equations, like you need to solve one of these integrals inside of a differential equation. And that means that you need a reasonable delay differential equations software. And you need to be able to interpolate your history function for all of your history. And this is something that we can nicely do in differential equations. So here we have the edge in Julia. And it's not impossible in other places too, I will admit. And in the future, and I was really hoping to get this done before this talk, but alas, I'm working on making a nice syntactic sugar for this to make it nice and work with just a single line of code pretty much for modeling toolkits, for Catalyst, and for pumas.jl. It's on my to-do list. So with this, I would like to thank the people involved and the people developing the packages that I rely heavily upon. And thank you guys for listening.